Hi, and welcome to Your Health, Your Way. I'm Lisa.
And I'm Kurt.
Welcome to today's show. Today's show is on Valentine's Day 2014. And today is a special Valentine's Day because we'll be seeing a full moon shortly after midnight tonight.
Right.
So before we go into talking about the moon, why don't we check in and see how we've been doing since our last video?
Things have been going pretty well. Our last video was the wrap-up of our 30-day exercise, our 30-day raw vegan project, if you will. I have remained a raw vegan foodist since that time. I have not concentrated as well on staying away from nuts as I had hoped. I'm still, eating probably more raw nuts than I should, but I'm feeling still just as good as I was before. So
that's great.
I just need to maybe scale back at some point when I'm more into better able to curb my temptations. I'll be able to maybe focus on the right combinations and scaling back from nuts, which do cause some acidity in the body. They're a little rougher on the digestion and things like that. But still, all in all, the bulk of my diet is fruit smoothies and salads, and I'm feeling really good with the results. So
and I noticed you have been doing well from what I've seen. For me, I'm still 70%, I'd say, raw vegan. This past week, since our last video, I have been including juices in the morning, like a 35-ounce to 40-ounce juice in the morning that I nurse for a couple of hours, and then I will usually have a salad for lunch, and then maybe a smoothie in the afternoon, maybe some raw gourmet at night. And the salads I try to make interesting, like I'll put dried cranberries and a little bit of crumbled blue cheese. I know that's not raw vegan, but it helps. Right now I'm just where I still need that taste, and it helps me to stay pretty much raw. So I have been enjoying that, and I'm glad that I'm doing more salads than before and definitely more juices. I think the detox part of raw veganism is important, and the juices are very helpful for that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm pretty happy with that.
Yeah.
Now, we seldom hear about how lunar cycles affect our health, and I want to talk to you a little bit about the significance of the moon first of all.
Yeah, sure. I'll start by looking back at the practices of the old-time religions. Okay. In Taoism, the moon is viewed as one of the 7 sovereigns. Okay. In India, Shiva, who's the god of the incarnated god of transformation, some refer to Shiva as the god of destruction, is often symbolized by the moon. In the old Greek religions, Artemis, Aphrodite, Selena, Hera were all symbolized or all tied to the moon. The Egyptian gods Thoth, which was associated with knowledge and wisdom, and Khonsu, who was associated with youth, both directly tied to the moon. And then the Incas worshipped the moon for her beauty and the benefits that she brought. So
I think it's so neat that all these different cultures had similar views on the moon or worshiped the moon for some reason or other, even though their reasons may have varied. And it's not like the time of the internet where people could communicate with each other. This was found out much later, I'm sure, through archaeological research.
Right.
So that's really neat information. Now, in terms of how the moon affects our overall health, what can you say about that?
Well, I believe that the ancients tended to have a better handle on their health than modern social structures, than our societies do today.
I wouldn't doubt that one.
I think that they developed ways in which they could revere the earth and the sun and the stars and the moon. And they had an understanding of how these celestial bodies and earthly bodies too affected their health and their sustenance, which in most cases was primarily fruits and vegetables. Now, if we can learn to interpret what the ancients thought when they looked up to the moon, then we can begin to see how they were affected by the moon's cycles. So our daily rhythms, our physical and mental daily rhythms, are affected by lunar phases. And in the book Moon Time by Joanna Pounger and Thomas Poppy, they discuss how our organs have rhythms in sync with our overall biorhythms. Right. And that's affected by the moon. And I see that directly as a consequence of gravity, actually.
And we've heard a lot about gravity and the moon. Mm-hmm. Now, how does gravity affect our biorhythms?
Well, I'm going to digress a little bit into how the moon affects gravity and tie that in with our biorhythms. I think that, well, first of all, gravity is a big part of our life. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for gravity. Obviously, we'd be floating around out there. And
might be funner, might be better.
There wouldn't be anything left of us to float around, I guess, once we got past the atmosphere. But so that's an important part. I think that it doesn't necessarily, gravity doesn't change in our day-to-day point of view as far as the Earth's position in relation to other celestial bodies. But we are affected by the moon specifically because of its proximity. The gravity is affected by the moon specifically because of its proximity to the Earth. And we know how gravitational forces of both the sun and the moon drive tidal changes in the seas. Yep. That's something that the seas are very large, and we can visually observe the dramatic changes in high tide and low tide in the seas. But if we think about it, most bodies of water or liquid, any kind of fluid, are simply considered non-tidal because we can't witness those changes. The changes are largely unmeasurable, like they are in the seas. But I would contest myself that biorhythms, which are affected by our lymph and our blood flow, are indeed tidal, and they are affected by the position of the moon, just like anything else that's tidal. Gravitational pull affects all substances, but liquid is obviously more fluid, so it flows more based on gravitational changes. Now, again, back to the ancients. I believe that the ancients recognized the elusive changes to some degree, but today most of us are so caught up in the social structures that we've created that we can lose touch with who we really are. Yeah, and how we're affected by those subtle magnetic and gravitational changes.
Yep. And we're made of mostly water. Mm-hmm. Mostly fluid, so it would make sense that we would be affected by the moon as well. Mm-hmm. Now, in one of our other videos, we spoke about sleep and hormones and how that's affected by light. Right. So would the moon have something to do with affecting our sleep and our hormones and our mood and things like that?
Well, absolutely. A full moon like tonight's, again, this is Valentine's Day 2014. We are experiencing a full moon tonight, shortly after midnight. It is far brighter than the new moon, which the new moon is when you can't notice it's not prominent in the sky. It's not noticeable. It's covered. It's dark. Melatonin levels tend to be at their lowest during a full moon. We also tend to take longer falling asleep, and we sleep less during a full moon because the moon is brighter, and we're also more apt to experience sensitivity due to our regular stresses or extraneous stresses during a full moon. Now, conversely, during a new moon, our minds and our bodies tend to be a little bit calmer. So that's a great time to try fasting for detox, because that's that calm state is when the body is more inclined to release toxins.
We ought to do that sometime.
We should, yeah.
And there was something you said. Oh, it'd be interesting to not look at a calendar, like to not know when there's a full moon or a new moon, and just to maybe take a month or two and jot down each day how your sleep was. How, did you fall asleep easily or not? Did it take you longer? And then go back and see if there's a correlation with how the moon was, and maybe do that over several months and see if there's some correlation.
Well, and one of the things that I've experienced just the last couple of days, we've had a lot of snow here and a number of things are closed. And so I've had a chance to be in the house and doing a lot of editing on these projects and working on our website and things like that. And I'm running across, little snags here and there. And my stress levels have been much more sensitive. They've been higher over smaller things as we approach the new moon, or the full moon tonight. Whereas, as I mentioned before, when we're under a new moon, when the new moon is not noticeable, I have noticed before that my biorhythms and my mental state is much calmer. I don't get as stressed out over the smaller things. So
if you don't see any more videos after this,
it's because of tonight's full moon.
or you don't see me in these videos,
right?
You know where the fingers.
And that, interestingly, that is, the lunar cycles they play a big part, and the lunar cycles and gravity play a big part physically, as we talked about, on the flow of our lymph and our blood, because those are fluids and they are tidal, I think. But also on our mental state, and talk to people that work in an emergency room. I mean, there is no scientific evidence that the lunar cycles actually affect people's mental state, but talk to people that work in an emergency room and you might get a different piece of information. And thus the correlation really between lunar and lunacy. Lunacy came from the word lunar. So people obviously think that there's something to that, and have for a very long time.
Yeah, and I think it affects our moods, of course, as well as our pets. Pets are very sensitive. They have not been brainwashed by society and taught to dampen down and dumb down the intuition that we have and the connection we have with the moon and the stars and so on. So we notice our pets acting differently sometimes, and we'll go, what is going on? And then a few days later we'll go, oh, full moon was coming or something.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we do.
Now, speaking of pets, this is a very special full moon, one because it's Valentine's Day, but also because we would like to take a moment to give tribute to a truly elegant, regal, and gentle soul, Stella, which is the Latin name for star. Stella was our greyhound, and she was every bit a bright light in our lives.
Yes, she was.
She would have been 14 years old today, February 14th of 2014. She would have been 14. But she's passed on to the next phase of her journey last summer. And she's taught us the power of true and abundant kindness, for sure. And we thank her for her grace and love.
Thank you for watching Your Health, Your Way.
And happy Valentine's Day.